From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Surveying what's left behind.
My feed troughs are concrete. One of them was running over this morning. They were anywhere from 11 to 12 inches deep.
See what happened after a month's worth of rain fell in just a few hours in northern Arkansas. Big soybean buys, but who's behind them?
You would think you would see more aggressive purchases from them in the future.
And the focus turns to weather.
It overall has been a favorable growing season.
And where we could see some bin-busting crops right now on AgDay.
AgDay is brought to you by Pioneer. Great performance in the field makes Pioneer brand corn #1 in America. For a winning season, it's Pioneer brand corn. Your best year starts here.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We're entering a key growing time for Midwest crops, and if current forecasts hold true, we could be seeing some big crop yields later this year. The National Weather Service releasing its outlook for the rest of summer. Now it's calling for elevated temperatures across much of the country, but the Midwest has lower chances for extreme heat. However, forecasters are predicting above normal temperatures in areas of the West stretching into the high plains. Now, as for the rain potential, the eastern half of the country looks to see higher chances for rain, while areas of the West could receive less, with the Midwest seeing equal chances.
I see nothing standing in the way of bumper Midwestern crops. Now, looking back at the recent history of weather, specifically in the Midwest at first, it overall has been a favorable growing season, but that's not to say it has been perfect. We have dealt with some extremes. That includes the upper Midwestern flooding of late June, as well as an early heat wave in the southern and eastern Corn Belt that fortunately came before corn and soybeans entered reproduction. Now, we've also dealt with our share of severe weather, some large hail and high winds, including this week's derecho from Iowa into parts of Illinois and Indiana. So on a local to regional scale, we have seen some adversity, but you look at the broad Midwestern picture and it has been quite favorable.
Now, Rippy says for corn and soybeans, you have to go far outside the Midwest to find stress on crops. Richard Crow saying right now the market is trading yields it's never seen. A break from the heat for much of the country in the east, but it's persisted over the west this weekend. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht has a look ahead to this week.
Well, that temperature outlook shifting away from that pocket of cool air across good portions of the United States back to the warmth, the heat. This is July 26th and then the 1st of August as summer continues to churn along. You got a good chance, some high confidence in above normal temperatures back up in the Dakotas and then swinging through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and up into the Northeast. But you can see that the overall trend is going to be for above normal temperatures in and across the United States. Different story into San Antonio as well as into Houston and near Dallas. We're kind of towards this below normal temperatures. That does not mean that we're going to see an extended period of below normal temperatures, but right now confidence is there that temperatures for a few days may be at or below average. Out there on the West Coast, a bit of a break from the heat during this time period. Remember, we've been scorching the last couple of weeks, July 26th through August 1st. There's that heat finally starting to break, but shifting to the east. And no, this isn't footage from last year's harvest. Brady in Texas says corn harvest is underway right now in the central part of the state. He said he was out harvesting last week ahead of the rain yesterday and today. I'll have more in your forecast coming up.
See what we can get done. Some researchers believe they've figured out how avian flu is getting into dairy cattle. The researchers with Iowa State University's College of Veterinary Medicine finding bovine mammary gland tissue can hold receptors for H5N1. Now, a co-author of that study says the idea to look at the mammary glands as a potential entry point for avian flu came after the virus was found in raw milk. Now, he said to think of the viruses like keys and receptors as locks. In order for the virus to enter a cell and then reproduce, it needs the right receptor, which they believe are the mammary glands. Right now, the virus is reported in 163 herds in 13 states. And ag trade did get a big boost last week after USDA announced 3 big grain sales to unknown destinations. One was for 18.7 million bushels of new crop soybeans, the other for 150,000 metric tons of soybean cake. And on Friday, there was a purchase of 105,000 metric tons of soybean cake and meal. While the sales are all to unknown destinations, analysts and traders think it was China behind them.
I think whenever we see unknown, we gravitate toward as it probably being China. And in this case, I think it is, because we hear trade rumors really before this announcement that China was looking for 6 or 7 cargoes out of the PNW. And not a surprise at all. And when you think about the possibility of President Trump getting in office again, I'm surprised China's not in here buying more of our soybeans. They've got a lot of soybeans unbooked from September on, and you would think they'd want to just buy as much as they can beforehand in case we do get into some sort of trade war. You know, they would have more power if they don't need our soybeans. So you would think you would see more aggressive purchases from them in the future.
China was a key topic of President Trump's speech at this year's Republican National Convention. The former president addressing the crowd last week on the final day of that convention in Milwaukee, accepting his 3rd GOP nomination. The speech, the first since the assassination attempt on his life. Now, for the most part, he focused on the core themes guiding his campaign, including crime, immigration, inflation, and the economy.
Remember, USMCA, I got rid of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made, and replaced it with USMCA, which is, they say, the best trade deal ever made. Actually, probably the best trade deal was the deal I made with China, where they buy $50 billion worth of our product. They were buying nothing. They buy $50 billion worth. They had to. But I don't even talk about it because of COVID.
Now, the Democratic National Convention is scheduled to take place next month from August 19th through the 22nd in Chicago. Possibly hanging in the balance of the November elections, the new Farm Bill. Republican Senate Minority Whip John Thune of South Dakota anticipating the new Farm Bill will be completed next year. Speaking at a CNN Politico event during the Republican National Convention, Thune expressed doubts about finishing the bill this year. Now, he emphasized its importance to his state's economy, but acknowledged significant differences that will likely delay its completion until 2025. Corn fought to hang on to gains at the end of last week. Up next, we'll look ahead as traders ponder the impacts of a potentially big corn crop. And later, an update from northern Arkansas after the area was hard hit by flooding last week in the country. A new report says production capacity of sustainable aviation fuel in this country could jump by 1,400% this year. The U.S. Energy Information Administration supplying this graphic. It says that jump will happen if all the previously announced capacity additions come online. The EIA also anticipating domestic production of biofuels to increase by about 50% this year, which it says will be led by rising SAF production. But the issue right now is what qualifies for SAF and how carbon intensity scores are calculated. Currently, sugarcane from Brazil can be imported into the U.S. for SAF. It has a lower CIS score than corn produced right here at home. Farm groups are now urging for that to change, advocating for domestic feedstock in tax credits. Now, the White House has set a goal of meeting 100% of U.S. aviation fuel demand with SAF by the year 2050. Drivers may be getting a short break at the pump. As of Friday, the national average for a gallon of regular unleaded gasoline is $3.50. AAA says that's down 4 cents from the previous week. Diesel now averaging $3.84 a gallon. That's down about 3 cents from the previous week. A spokesperson says there's a decreased demand for fuel, and that may be because some drivers are avoiding road travel due to the recent scorching heat. Average gas prices are currently above $4 in 3 states, all located out on the West Coast. California has the most expensive gas in the U.S. at $4.71 a gallon. Corn and wheat pushed higher to end last week. AgDay's Michelle Rook has more on what traders will be watching this week in Markets Now.
Grain markets closing mixed on Friday. Garrett Troy with Ag Trader Talk is back with us. And Garrett, like I said, mixed on Friday, but we did have lower weekly closes in all the grains. But do you think that the market is getting close to a bottom because we are kind of stimulating some demand, aren't we?
It feels like it in the soybean market, at least. I still think there's a lot of questions as far as the supply side is concerned in corn. But we did have a significant flash sale of new crop soybeans this week, which everyone assumes is China. And the fact that CFR values into China right now from August through the end of the year are favoring U.S. soybeans. So the fact that Chinese new crop purchases are historically small, but if that starts to build here, then I think the market will focus a little bit more on potential supply issues. When we don't have much demand in the bin out there, it's easy to focus on supply until this demand shows up. But at least I think we found a value area. Considering the money market shorts in both corn and soybeans, a lot of it, and I'd expect some sort of consolidation here, depending on forecasts here into the month of August.
But what is the catalyst, I guess, to get them to change their trend or start buying or covering their shorts here? Because weather certainly hasn't been threatening, Garrett.
No, the early look at August weather looks fairly benign. Cool temperatures through the balance of pollination in the corn market, ample rains, and we've already got basically erased any sort of dryness out of the state of Iowa in this last drought monitor. So it's going to be seasonal lows, and I think that some of it is there's a lot of questions as far as farmer ownership. The USDA did not incorporate the stocks findings. But I think we get into seasonal lows into the end of August might be a time where the funds start to look at covering.
And then how much recovery can you expect out of that?
That's a $64,000 question. The recovery we had the last time the fund was short and covered was only about 25 cents. What would put us back to 430 corn. Not too attractive, but I think that a lot. This depends on how willing the farmer is to sell, which at this point I don't think is too willing.
No, you're right about that. All right, thanks, Garrett Trey, Ag Trader. Tough love, more AgDay coming up.
Watch Markets Now with Michelle Rook on the Farm Journal YouTube channel, keeping you updated throughout the day on the markets at the open, midday, and close. Find out what moved the markets today and what to expect the market to do next.
To contact Garrett, call him at 888-745-2020 or find him at agtradertalk.com.
Precipitation forecast as we go through the rest of the week. As we just looked at, the pattern is starting to shift. Basically, the heat is starting to work to the east with rain chances kind of in and around that gradient, that temperature contrast. Still a wet weekend this past weekend and then a wet week ahead for parts of the Gulf Coast states, but also into the southeast until that pattern starts to break down. So this is a look at the next 7 days. Still dry and still hot, but by the end of July into early August, start to see kind of a flip back to some cooler temperatures, or at least average high temperatures. Precipitation outlook, this is the 24th through the 28th. You got the green, obviously indicating wetter than normal conditions, extending back off here to the East Coast as well. Drier, and also we're going to kick up the heat towards the end of July, early August, into the Dakotas, and Minnesota, and into Wisconsin, with the overall trend staying relatively dry. Now for the rest of the week, the jet stream is going to look something like this, and not expecting much in the way of impressive systems coming through. Also worth noting, the tropics, the Atlantic and the Gulf, quiet in regards to tropical systems. We're nowhere near peak hurricane season, but it's worth noting anytime you can go 7, maybe even 10 days with very low, if not no activity, that is a positive with the way things are shaping up in the Atlantic and the Gulf. In the Gulf of Mexico. There's a jet stream coming in now on Tuesday. So again, high pressure is going to build in back here to the west. And then as we get deeper into the work week, it is going to gradually shift. Now there is some energy trying to work its way through the jet stream back up here to the north and to the northwest. It's going to be relatively shallow, but it's going to be right along that gradient that we could see some showers, as well as possibility of some cooler air trying to fill down to the south. You can see we kind of even things out. This is Saturday and into Sunday of next week. More of a zonal pattern, which is going to keep the heat around a good portion of the United States, but also down here to the southeast as well. Again, that's the jet stream coming in on Saturday, and then by Sunday, that reinforcing hit with that high pressure. So zonal pattern, and by Wednesday and Thursday going into the weekend, and then it's next week that will start to shift things around with the heat building more to the east rather than just sitting on the west coast. We'll start off with Kingman, Kansas. Partly cloudy, high of around 80, 6 degrees, low of 64. Kingman, Ohio. Got some morning showers, high around 83 degrees. Any guesses? Kingman, Maine. Mostly sunny, high of 79 degrees.
Even folks who have seen it all have a bucket list. Well, Machinery Pete is here to share his list next. And later, a month's worth of rain fell in hours. We're headed to Arkansas to survey the damage with a farmer asking what's next in the country. You would think Machinery Pete has seen it all when it comes to farm machinery auctions, but even he has a bucket list.
Well, folks, 34 plus years covering auctions. Of course, I've got connected with a ton of great auction companies throughout the U.S. and Canada. One of my favorites, Wheeler Auctions and Real Estate down in Paris, Missouri. Chaz Wheeler, Kirby Fecht, and the crew there do an awesome job. And I tell you, it's been on my bucket list for a long time now to catch either their big January consignment sale or their summer annual July consignment auction. And happy to announce, actually going to be there this Saturday, July 27th, for their annual July consignment auction. Huge sale, over 2,800 pieces on their website, according to the last listing week leading up to the sale. And boy, talk some late model equipment. They'll have 4 rings on the auction. Now in ring 1, I got looking, and if you isolate down to 1 to 4-year-old high horse tractors, 26 of those. And just a couple of examples, they'll have this 23 model John Deere 8R340, 365 hours on it. How about this 23 model John Deere 8R370, only 85 hours like new. And for you red folks, here's a 22 model Case IH Magnum 380, 262 hours. Now, of course, this time of year, a lot of folks looking for combines. And in ring number 1 alone, they'll have, I think, 44 combines. And just a couple highlights. There's a pair of 23 model Case IH 8250s, 357 and 282 SEP hours. Here's a 22 model John Deere X9 1100, 460 SEP hours. And also a 23 model John Deere S780, 271 SEP hours. So again, folks, head to Paris, Missouri this Saturday, July 27th. I will be there filming for our Machinery Pete TV show. And of course, online bidding, go to wheelerauctions.com. But I hope to see you at the sale.
In northern Arkansas, farmers are trying to tally up losses following last week's heavy rains. One farmer walks us through his fields next in the country. We told you last week about flooding in northern Arkansas after more than a month's worth of rain fell in just a few hours. The Arkansas Farm Bureau talked with one producer assessing the damage.
When I got to my house, my driveway down here, I couldn't even get across it there to start with. There was logs floating across it. My feed troughs are concrete. One of them was running over this morning. They were anywhere from 11 to 12 inches deep, and it was running over. So I know I got a lot when I get those that full. It's been at least 40 years before this has been this big here in this area. I finished baling hay up there in that field about Saturday, I think, 3 or 4 o'clock. And when I went off the hill this morning, the road crew told me I had some hay washed away up there. So I drove up there, and sure enough, there's one probably a good 100 yards from where it was. It took a pretty good rise to get over the highway and get in that field and take that out. So I came over the highway and got into that field. That field is not even near the branch. It's probably 60, 80 yards from the branch.
So it crossed over the highway?
Yeah. Where those, you know, they were cleaning out the culverts up there, yeah. Those stopped up and with debris, and it diverted the water into my hayfield. It'd have to be 3 or 4 feet deep at least, maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. Actually, the road crew said they could just see the top of that bale when they were up there. It could weigh 500 to 700. I'm sure it's waterlogged, which will ruin it. But the others up there look like the water had been up on them at least a foot up in the field there. I don't know if they'll be any good. If they do, they won't be much. You know, I don't know if the cattle will eat them. They'll mildew and mold inside. The water gates is going to be a problem, and the down trees laying in the creek bed, uprooted from the banks. If a calf tried to cross to get to a mama or something up there, I could lose a calf. I really don't know until I can get to my place. I'll have to fix roads before I can even get to my place. These streams, when they come down, they don't just gradually rise. They come like a wall of water. It's a flash flood. It's just a wall of water when these streams come down. They don't just start small and get bigger.
And our thanks to the Arkansas Farm Bureau for sharing that story with us. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.